welcome to our spring conversation for IDA Georgia. We're going to give everybody a hot minute to be logging in because everybody's coming to us separately. Um, we're Allison and Rachel and I are in our beautiful spring. We decided we would all go to the park and just film from the park because it's so beautiful these days. But Rachel is sad because being in Connecticut, she said not quite as
Not great yet.
it's not great yet. Still rainy and cold. Lots of snow this year. How many inches do you think you got all year?
We had one big blizzard. That one in our area, I think we were at 13 inches, and then we had other storms. I'd say we probably had 20-ish to 23 inches throughout the year, which is a lot compared to other previous years. So this is the most snow we've had in a long time.
Wow, that's a lot.
But the
And
kids enjoyed it.
Did we have any snow, Allison? I don't think we did.
we did not have snow this year. It is a balmy 84 degrees in Georgia right now, Rachel.
Oh, we're
Yeah,
looking
this
at
is
50s
Yeah.
and raining.
yeah,
Oh,
But we have the spring background.
that's right.
Makes it
So it's
feel good.
coming. It's coming.
mhm.
We're
It's
gonna feel good
coming.
about it. Um, So I think I'm going to go ahead and introduce these lovely ladies, even though many of you may have, if you registered for this, you have seen some of their bios. But I'll just briefly introduce that let's see, on my right is Rachel Plunkett, and she is a third grade teacher in the East Line Public Schools, and she's in her 16th year as an educator, and she's going to tell us about how she's implemented structured literacy. And Allison Taylor is she's here in Georgia. She has 20 years experience and she is working in the Marietta City Schools. And I'm blanking second grade teacher.
Yes, ma'am.
So I am going to try to keep up with our chat, but I also will tell you that when you guys registered, you gave us some great questions. So what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to do like a little overview, um, get some pearls of wisdom from these ladies, and then spend about half the time doing that and half the time addressing the questions that you guys threw out to us. So thank you for those questions. Um, I guess let's just go ahead and start with tell us how you got into structured literacy, because I know you have very different ways of coming into it. So maybe Allison, do you want to start and tell us about how you were introduced to it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like you said, Janet, I've been teaching. I think I'm in year 23. I'm in those mid 20s where you lose track. I'm far enough away where I can't count towards retirement yet, but I'm far enough in where I have no idea how long I've been teaching. I think I'm at year 23. Um, but so I actually started my career teaching structured literacy and not knowing it because we didn't call it that. And my first curriculum was reading mastery and it was phonics based and it was all of those things. And then slowly as the pendulum swung to workshop model, I just swung right with it, just like a good little teacher should, and didn't question it. And then about 5 years ago, the school district that I'm in started, we were rumbling with that question. It's like kids are really struggling to read. What should we do? And finally, we were like, well, let's actually ask experts and figure out what to do and then solve the problem instead of just feeling the problem. So for the last 5 years, I have been in front of the fire hose. Just literacy is a love language of mine now because I know how great it can be. And I've been in this classroom for 5 years implementing all of the things that we're talking about today. And yeah, my journey has just really reignited my passion as an educator because I'm working really hard, but it's working.
That's the good news.
Yes, ma'am.
Rachel, how about you? What was how did you come about into this?
So 3 years ago, I switched to my current district that I'm now in. And for me, I had been seeking something like this out for my career. So in my past district, we also did the workshop model. I would pull guided reading groups, and I always just felt like I wasn't quite sure what I was doing. I was doing my best, using my resources. I was almost overwhelmed with resources and wasn't sure, what was adequate, accurate, what kind of plan to follow. I felt very alone. When I decided to switch districts, in Connecticut about 3 years ago, they really started to talk about, the science of reading, and the interviews really wanted candidates, the school districts really wanted candidates with this background. And so I really started to dive into it, to prepare. And I just felt like it was something that I had always been looking for when wanting to teach reading in reading groups. And so, for about 2 years now, when I first began in our district, we were changing reading curriculum. So something in Connecticut was the state told us that we needed to choose, a primary resource. And we piloted and we had a list to choose from. So we went through that. And once we did that, we started to really look into structured literacy and following, specific lesson plans that we collaborated with the Hill for Literacy. And now, we're going through implementing these plans, doing coaching cycles, and that's how, this came to be for me. And I'd say it's just what I've been looking for. And it's really, you feel confident as a teacher and you see the growth in the students, and the data shows that. So it's been
Yeah.
wonderful.
Good, good. I don't even know if I introduced myself. I'm Janet Street. I'm an IDA Georgia board member, and I train teachers in structured literacy, also known as Orton Gillingham, for my case. Everybody has a slightly different take on it. Um, uh, so let's talk about, kind of what your transition was like getting into it. Because I know one of our people who registered was saying, "How did you get into this and how did you get started?" So I know I've heard you say it was like a complete paradigm shift. So maybe Allison, do you want to start with that one?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it completely was. I was, like I said, mid-career, and someone came and told me, um, we now know better, so let's do better. And that was a really powerful moment of, Marietta, where I am. We partnered with a lot of different community members, and our superintendent was all in. And then he got the board all in, and then he got leadership all in. And so my sort of transition was holistic in that way of that, this is what we're doing now. This is the new curriculum. This is the new pieces. And then once I started to get into it, um, I was happy. I was happy to throw out the baby and the bathwater to get the decodables and to get the strategies and the routines because they were really making changes in my classroom. um, but the hard part about that is also, what do you use? And if you're going to take things from teachers, what will you put in its place? So that transition was probably the most challenging because, like I told you, Janet and Rachel, they actually came into my classroom and like took the things that should not be in a structured literacy classroom. And if you take something, you have to replace it. And so we we did the proverbial build the plane while we flew it. um because there wasn't the 5 years ago there wasn't the opportunities for curriculum that there are now. There weren't the
Right.
opportunities for the resources. Everybody was kind of like in this initial stage, and so we took old and then we started replacing it, and like every time we would learn another piece, we would have a cycle like Rachel was saying where we meet with coaches and we do training, and that's constantly happening even still to year 5. But when we were doing that and we would replace one thing with the other, it got easier. And it got easier because one of the things I love most about structured literacy is the things that I'm doing in my literacy classroom, I do in my science class. I do in my math class. I It's not just that literacy block. It changed my entire day. And so like that transition, it was hard. It was really hard because, I have my apples box that I teach my apples unit with Johnny Appleseed, and we eat apples and we graph apples. But there's ways to make all of that still fit. And that's really that transition piece of how do I keep what I love about teaching, but do it in a way that's going to make the most sense for my students?
Yeah, amazing. Rachel, what would you say? What was your transition like?
So my transition just came at a really natural time for me because, like I said, I was looking to switch districts, and this was a time where all the schools in Connecticut, had to find this primary resource. So previously, my district actually had no, primary resource curriculum. Teachers wrote their own units of study, UBD templates and that. So I came in and decided to pilot some of the primary resources, which helped support me in that transition. And then, we actually started to use Dibbles as well for our benchmark data. And then with that Dibbles, we began to create these small, structured reading groups for students based on that data. And then, some additional screeners as well. So for me, it was really natural. And like I had said, something that we had been looking for, the district, this was we're kind of all in initiative. And the district really supported us. We revamped the book room. So it went, we had decodables, we have geodes now. Our book room is accessible. It's by phonics skill or theme, multisyllabic, all of the, different types of phonics skills that you would be teaching and working with. And then the geodes help as well. So it was just a really natural transition where we were all in, the coaching cycles were focused on that, support and planning with each other. So it was like I said, something that I had been looking for. So for me, it was more natural. But if I think back to the past, it would be really challenging for me to make that shift if I was not making, a general district switch
Well,
because you
and one
have your classroom set up and, your ways and all of your things you've worked so hard with for years and all of your resources that you have.
right. One thing that you guys have both said is you're talking about coaching. And I really think it is kind of impossible to transition to something that not only have you not ever taught it before, but there's a very good chance that a lot of teachers weren't taught with phonics. They don't even know really what phonics is and what structured literacy is. And so, to have that coach be a non-threatening person who can guide you through this transition sounds like it's a very, very important thing.
Yeah, the coaching model was essential, and I'm actually just about to finish a coaching cycle right now with my literacy consultant. And for this cycle, we focused on a small literacy group that were students who were working on their fluency automaticity. So they're accurate readers, but they need to increase their rate, with phrasing and expression. And so we actually, sit together at the table and we teach it together. We plan, a week in advance and we meet with our cortex. We plan using a structured literacy outline that the district has developed. And then we implement that plan together. And, she supports me and when I have questions and it's, a great learning experience. And we look at, progress monitoring data, the data
Okay,
before the
so
cycle and well after the cycle as well.
I want to pick up on that because I love that you said that. The data,
Mhm.
looking really not only getting the data, and it doesn't have to take a long time like Dibbles, getting the data, comparing it to not only national norms, how is this child doing on a grand scale, but also how's this child doing compared to this child in the winter or in the spring or in the fall or last year. And one thing I've noticed is that I was in the classroom for a long time, but not now. And parents now, young parents, young people, they live in a data world and they want to hear data about their children. And Allison, talk to that because I remember you saying, how much easier your conferences are now.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things like Rachel is saying, like the coaching helps because somebody is out there kind of finding the best practices in the research and the things and bringing it. And so we actually are finishing a data cycle. And tomorrow is our opportunity to meet with the entire literacy team and go over data. So all of our students have their progress monitoring. So if they're in a phonics skill group, they did a real word, nonsense word reading, and then an encoding or writing piece for some words and sentences that match the skill they're in. For our consolidated kids who have mastered all of the phonics skills necessary, they were working on comprehension with them. And so I have all of these pieces of data. And like you're saying, it's about achievement, but it's about growth. And like high achievement is wonderful, but if there's no growth, then like we're missing an opportunity. And so because you can get such rich literacy data. And I know one of the questions was like, where do you find these things if your district isn't already leaning there? And there's a lot of places to find dibbles or IDI or a spelling inventory. But the thing is like when I would then have all of this, I could then go to parents and I could say, I have concerns. I'm worried about Allison's decoding. And this is what I mean when I say that. And here is my evidence of like them struggling with medial sounds or things like that. And so it took a lot of the, I think, and I wonder and I worry out of my job because it's a really hard job to sit in front of a parent and say, like, we're your child is not making progress. And we used to sit there and say, your child is not making progress, and I'm not sure why. Like I
Right,
don't know
right.
why they're not getting better because I don't know what they're needing. I'm teaching every day, but they're just not getting, and it's because I'm not teaching what they need. And so with that data, I'm able to be like prescriptive and diagnostic to each student. What do you need now and what do you need next? And then I'm also able to sit in front of those parents and say, this is where your child is. And I know it because here's the data that proves it. And here's what we're going to do next. And that's a really powerful piece of being a professional.
That's
I'm a
right.
professional. And I would
Right.
always say, like, I know without a doubt that there is a problem here. I just don't know what the problem is. They're at a level C. They've been at a level C the whole entire time. I don't know why they can't pass Edwin's haircut. It's just too much for them. But now I can say, you know, we've been working on phonological awareness and your child is missing a medial sound, or we've been working on morphology and your child is dropping their suffixes and things like that. Like now I can actually be that professional that sits in front of you like a doctor when your child is sick and not able to read. As a doctor, I can sit in front of you and said, I ran tests and my tests tell me this. And now that I have the test results, I know what to do next.
Whenever I teach, whenever I train teachers, I always say to them on the first day, you're going to be really angry at some point during this week because you're going to realize that you were never taught to teach reading in college. And invariably, they get so angry. And I always say exactly what you just said, Allison, like you wouldn't go to a doctor who hadn't, didn't know how to do an appendectomy or hadn't, you would they're just some basic things that doctors are trained in. And it should be the same way with teachers. And thankfully, that is beginning to change.
Mhm.
So I love hearing that. All right, let's shift gears a little bit. Um, what tips do you have for people who are getting into this? Or let me say it this way. What about potential pitfalls? Like what are things that can go wrong that you need to avoid or um, you know, either tips or pitfalls? Throw some of those out for us.
I'll say really quickly, just the number one way to avoid pitfall and tip is to be solution minded as you're walking into this.
Mhm.
There's a lot of this where the conversation is going to be like, well, this is really hard. Well, I don't have this resource. Well, my teammate can't, or my schedule doesn't allow, or things like that. Like you have to walk into this paradigm shift solution minded. And if you don't, then it won't work.
Right. And that's probably true of any change, right? You're always going to have naysayers, and guess what? They're not successful, and eventually they don't fit in.
No.
Yeah,
And eventually your data looks so good that they want to do what you're doing because you are moving the needle. And all good teachers borrow and great teachers steal. And if somebody's outpacing me, I'm gonna come knocking. I'm gonna tell
I
them, what do you
love that.
think? Yeah. And
Rachel, what
that's
were you going to say?
So I think that you can sometimes get bogged down in the resources too. So, just thinking about, okay, what text am I choosing? What decodables, what passages? And that can be really overwhelming at times. And something that my team and I have done to support that is, we are using geodes, but not everybody has geodes. We also have a full book room that's very organized. But something we've done is we do have in our district what we call a teaching and learning hub. And so if we create structured literacy plans with Cortex and skill focuses, we have our consultants vet them and then they can put them in this hub. And it's not something that, okay, I'm going to take this, print it, and it's going to exactly work for this group of kids, but it does have a bit of a structure for you to get started. You can tweak the words and the vocabulary that you've pulled and things like that. But that has been helpful because, of course, we're saying, when are we planning for these small groups? Every day we do have an hour for small reading groups in our schedule. Not everybody has that, but we do have that. And, of course, at first we were very nervous about, well, when is this planning time going to happen for this, effectively and efficiently with resources? And so we did kind of create this hub and team together to just at least get, a structure down, and then you can use that plan and tweak it, but you have something to go off of too, or some, sharing some books that worked well with your kinds of learners and things like that. So time is always, very challenging. And so if we could kind of plan, together and share some of those resources, that's been really helpful. And, again, like I said, one thing that I always struggled with is there's so many resources, like you can just go down a rabbit
Mhm.
hole of looking at things. And so just talking with other people and saying, what worked for you, and taking their advice and getting, a plan of where to go.
And speaking of resources, before we end tonight, I'm going to post a link. These fine ladies have put together a list of some of their favorite, go-tos, links that have great resources. We have a little description of them for you. So I'll post that toward the end of the call, so that everybody can access those, because sometimes, especially when you're new at this, or even if you're not new at it, it's like, oh my gosh, another great resource. Go ahead.
Uh, Rachel, I was about to say Rachel put something on the sheet because I've had the sneak peek to look at it. But Rachel put something over there, and I have already told my entire school. Like she put a morphology a website on there that helps you kind of break down the morphological words, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I've been doing this for 5 years, and I hadn't found that resource. So
Yeah.
it's a really great doc.
Yeah, I'm glad. I'm glad. Good. Um, okay. What about tips? I mean, with parents, maybe one thing you can talk about, Allison, I know you told me about a surprise for you was how it improved the behavior in the classroom.
Yeah, that is a huge part for me that is just another kind of feather in the cap of structured literacy and the proof of how well it works. A lot of times we would notice that like kids are misbehaving. And what we started to make the connection to once we had started the structured literacy journey is that kids aren't acting up right now because they're not trying to avoid work. They're not trying to avoid the thing that's been so challenging to them. Nobody likes reading class when you can't read. Nobody likes sharing ideas when you might need more time to process or something. And so what we noticed is actually from the beginning of this journey for us to now, which a little bit of that happened in COVID, but we have seen a 68% drop in classroom disruption referrals because they're not trying to get out of anything anymore. Teachers are teaching and we're confident and we are teaching with our hair on fire, but kids are receiving it and they're learning. And so nobody wants to leave a classroom that's fun where you're actually able to learn. And so that's been, I don't think that was a byproduct anybody expected to come just from solid literacy instruction. But here we are, our math scores are improving, our reading scores are improving, our behavior is improving. It's just this domino effect of like school improvement just based on this one feels like little change because it's just all we did was change the way that we teach literacy, but teacher retention is up, behaviors are down, parent involvement is up, because we're being more open to them about what we're doing in the classroom. So it really is just kind of like seeps into every crevice of the school to just make it better.
Do you feel like math is also changing at the same time?
I think math is lagging, but I think math is going to undergo go through a structured change as well. It's with reading we were in a place where we were like, okay, I'm going to ask you to read even though I've kind of taught you to read, and this, the inquiry based math where it's like I'm just going to give you fractions and let you tinker with it. Like literacy has proven to us that that is not a way to teach students anything. And so it's
My
I'm
favorite,
I'm
my
just I'm trying
favorite,
but it's
my
just it
favorite saying for that is when Nadine Gabb says, "If I exposed a child to a beautiful piece of Chopin, I'm pretty sure she wouldn't learn to play the piano."
exactly. That's the thing I tell parents all the time. I could ask a child to listen to Mozart for 3 years and then hand them a piano and say, go play Mozart, and it's not going to happen
No.
because I didn't teach that. I didn't teach you how to play piano. And so I think math is coming around in that same kind of way of like, are we truly teaching math in a structured, explicit way that helps students learn? And so that's another great kind of domino effect is like math will improve.
Yes, I do believe that. Rachel, what were you going to say?
Taken on explicit instruction and that model and really worked really hard, kind of previously prior to starting all of this, really going along with, we've studied Anita Archer, we've done a lot with that, and we really took on explicit instruction. And I think that, supported this as well, having that background for us really helped.
If you don't know who Anita Archer is, she's an amazing educator. And a few years ago, you'll have to feel free to go on the IDA Georgia website, and you can find a recording of when we hosted her for one of the spotlight videos. And she is just fantastic. I mean, everything she says, I just want to yell and scream. She's just so wonderful. Um, okay, I am thinking, are there any other successes or tips or anything you guys want to talk about before I jump into some of our questions?
I just want to say that something that's really helped support me, like I've mentioned, is just having like a structured plan to follow. So we developed, a blank template for, students in a group who need, oral reading fluency and, automaticity, that rate, accuracy, decoding, comprehension. And so the groups are, based off of our data, they're changing often. And that really helps support the students. But the structure of the plan is really helpful because it's this, it follows the same structure. Like you start by rereading a familiar text. You do a sound drill, you introduce the concept, you'll pick some words to tap and blend, you'll pick some phrases to practice reading, building words and trick word recognition, actually reading the text, introducing it, pre-teaching vocabulary, ending with some comprehension. So the plan that we follow is also over multiple sessions. And so we've also kind of timed out each piece. So in one day I'm getting through these parts of the plan. This is day 2, this is day 3. So you can stick with the same text for a few days, which has also been really supportive as well. So that's something that's really been helpful for planning.
Something that's really surprising to a lot of teachers, I know it was to me, is that, you kind of feel like if you do that same structure all the time, it's going to get boring. But that's not true. It's not true. So that's another Anita Archerism. She talks about, oh, thank you. We just posted the link to Anita Archer's spotlight video, so everybody can see that. Um, I love what she says. She says, it's not drill and kill when you're talking about, for instance, your card deck. It's drill and kill leads to skill and thrill because they
Hmm.
get better and better at it. And the thing about a structured lesson is you don't have to waste time explaining the rules to the new game. They know exactly what to do. You can you can be so efficient in your instruction because it's very structured. It's not, there are no surprises. And the kids actually, they don't mind it at all. They like the structure. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, absolutely. Mine love that like it's time for phonics. They know what folder to get out. They know to start reading their decodable and circling the skill and all of that. I think, yeah.
Because you know
Um,
what kids love more than anything is success.
mhm. Absolutely. I do want to
And
mention just one last tip, like you were saying before we transition, because this is actually something that Rachel mentioned, that I loved the way that she said it is like, when we were doing literacy small groups, you might meet with your high achieving group once or twice a week. You might meet with your middle group 3 times a week, but you're meeting with your lowest group like every single day. And you really don't get to know your readers that way. I mean, if I have a group of 6 kids and I'm only listening to them read once a week and the rest of the time I'm having them be independent, then I don't know that child as a reader. I haven't learned that child and how they read and if it's a fluency or how their comprehension is. And so I also think one of the benefits of structured literacy is that you really do get to know your children
That's such a
thoroughly.
good point. And then you feel confident when you sit in front of that parent.
That parent
Okay.
or that MTSS meeting or all of those opportunities, I just feel more confident because yes, I have the data that tells me your reading level, but I also read with your child every single day. And so I have that knowledge also. So the
That's nice.
anecdotal of that is really powerful.
Okay. Rachel, unless there's anything you want to put in, I'm going to jump to the questions.
no, go ahead. Thank you.
Okay. Y'all, we had so many good questions.
Mhm.
Um, the first one, I'm just going to go in order. What kind of best practices do you have for teaching older students to read? Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
I would say still, explicit, direct, meet them where they're at, create and file that scope, review previous skills. Um,
Exactly.
that,
And a lot of times we think of younger students working on phonology and older students working on morphology, but that may not be the case. You may have some big gaps you have to fill, right?
Absolutely. I think I think also reminding yourself that like best practices are best practices. So if a kindergarten classroom is doing something, there's no reason a fifth grade classroom can't do the scaffolded version of the same thing. And so if you have, older students who are struggling to read, then that's a good thing. And if they're not even struggling, then that's where you're saying, Janet, is that's when you can get into the deeper concepts of literacy, talking with opportunities to respond like that's a great older student skill is the opportunities to respond, not having them collaboratively answer questions. So that's something even in my second grade classroom, we do a lot where like you might talk nobody answers anything without talking to a partner first.
Mm.
It's just one of those things because I'm not here to get you, and I don't want to play the gotcha game. I want you to learn, and you're going to learn best when you put your ideas and another person's ideas and you bring them all together. And then I might have you work in your pod. So in your table of four, we're going to do that. And so that really just it improves their vocabulary, improves their oral comprehension. And so all of those are things that really work well in older classrooms is just letting them be more collaborative, but also, just do the things.
I will say with older students, when I'm primarily taught in sixth grade at a school that was just for dyslexic kids, and you can't do too many cutesy things when you're working with older kids because it does feel insulting to them. And so one thing I would recommend, sometimes it's hard to find, or it used to be, it's much better now. It's hard to find good decodables that are interesting at their interest level. And I know that one of the people I'm working with now is using Dog on a Log. Are you guys familiar with that? They have decodable chapter books. So
Mm.
they're not so dumbed down, and not dumbed down, that's the wrong way to say it. They're not so simple. I mean, they have kind of interesting topics. And so that's something I would recommend too. Okay, I'm going to go on to the next one. This is from a mom whose child was just diagnosed with dyslexia. She wants to know what support can I get for him at school and how can I help him?
There's a lot of variables into that question because, every school system is different. And if you have a diagnosis, then that's obviously an angle that you're working, hopefully, with getting support for your children. But I would definitely say, like, the number one thing is talk to the teacher. What are you guys doing? What routines are you using? What resources are you using so that you can help, be on the same page and be knowledgeable and be at home supporting what's happening at school? But as far as like, what supports can you get him at school, that feels like an MTSS RTI
Yeah.
conversation. Yeah.
But I would say at the very least, ask what the curriculum is that they're
Mm-hmm.
using. Like, is it
Mm.
balanced literacy or is there really some really good direct, explicit phonics instruction that's cumulative and structured? And, are they what are your teachers trained in? I would want to know, are they Orton Gillingham trained? Are they Wilson trained? Are they, are you using UFly? Whatever. Something that's a good structured literacy resource,
Mm-hmm.
which is, I know, hard for parents to know, um, but keep talking about that. That's a good one. Okay, here's another one. Why is structured literacy important in early childhood education? It's kind of a broad one, but it's good.
I think, it would, the, step by step process, explicit, it helps prevent gaps later on, and it teaches skills in a logical order and gives children lots of practice and teaches them how reading works at a young age.
Well, and also the alternative is more of this balanced literacy whole language. And we know that doesn't work because kids aren't learning how to be independent readers, how to tackle a word. They're not learning those word strategies with those programs. Is that fair?
Oh, it's absolutely fair. I
Yeah.
mean, if the question is why teach structured literacy, because it teaches kids to read, and
Yeah.
reading is a civil right. Like everybody has the right to read, and it's like you said, like we've done balanced literacy, and no matter how many bean bags I have and how low I turn my lights down, no child learned to read because they can't learn to love reading if they can't read, and
Yeah.
so that whole balanced literacy, if they find the right book and the right cozy spot in your classroom, and they'll just learn to fall in love with reading, and you can't fall in love with something you don't know how to do. And
Yeah.
so
That's well
structured
said.
literacy, yeah, structured literacy is important because it teaches kids to read.
Yeah. And it's kind of like nothing builds confidence like success. Um,
Absolutely.
Writing tips. Writing is the hardest part. And this person said writing is the hardest part for our population. I would say you're not alone. It's the hardest thing for everyone because it's the hardest thing. So what tips do you have about writing? It's a big part of literacy.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it's a huge part of literacy. And, my biggest thing is that when you're practicing decoding, practice encoding. So just like learning to read is a practiced skill, learning to write is a practice skill. And we actually are having a conversation in my school right now. Like we've created what we call consolidated readers, but we need consolidated writers. And so are we putting the focus in, first you got to be able to write a sentence before you can write that paragraph, before you can write that story. And so are we helping build that knowledge of how these skills are connected, and then in that same structured explicit way, Natalie Wexler wrote The Writing Revolution, which is a wonderful text that breaks down into small structured explicit this step then this step pieces that really build strong writers. And so my thing is, where we talk now about how students should be reading in every part of their day. Like students should be writing in every part of their day. We have
Right.
morphological practice in science and social studies. We practice our morphology. I mean, like I said, in math, when we're doing, when we're talking about the word quadrilateral, we're talking about what does quad mean? And then we're talking about, okay, like how many syllables do you hear? What are you hearing? Like, and we do that. So that is a structured piece of my math lesson because I have to teach you to read, but I also have to teach you to write. And that doesn't just happen in that 1 hour literacy block. It happens throughout the entire day.
I really love something Steve Graham said. I don't know if you know that researcher, but he said it all comes down to the sentence level. And if you think about it, whether you're writing an email or a letter or a novel, what are you editing? You're really not editing the whole paragraph. You're editing at the sentence level. And so I know a lot of teachers feel like they have to go big, paragraphs, essays. But the fact is, coming back down to that sentence, and I think Natalie Wexler's book, which I just put in the chat, The Writing Revolution, does a really good job of breaking that down. Rachel?
Absolutely. The kernel sentences and how to expand them and really focusing in. She does a great job focusing on like the four types of sentences, how you can use conjunctions to build stronger sentences. So it really is, you're right. Like the sentence level is where it's where the magic happens.
Yeah. Rachel, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
I just think it's definitely a work in progress for my district. And with writing, we're in year two of a curriculum. And, if you're teaching third grade like me, the curriculum assumes that, since kindergarten, these students have been explicitly taught to do these types of writing structures and writing this paragraph writing and whatever it may be. And so you are actually working on filling a lot of gaps and there's just a lot of tweaks that have to be made still, and we're just kind of starting to really more think about finding our way with that and how we're going to fill some gaps. How, we've been really focused on a lot of informational and opinion writing and not so much narrative. So it's been something that we've been really trying to incorporate in, a small group structured literacy group, a comprehension day, an open-ended response. We've been trying to put more of that into that plan, with those kinds of students who need more support and filling those gaps as well. So that's definitely something that we're working on. And in as far as other content areas, we actually do a lot of open-ended responses in math, in grade three. And so that's been something that the students have worked really hard at, and a structure of their writing and incorporating math vocabulary, and we're really starting to do that a lot in third grade.
Um, and one of our colleagues has just posted another spotlight video about the writing revolution. So make sure to watch that one too. I'm going to answer one of these questions quickly because we don't have all the time in the world. This person says, how can we apply this to our early learners in pre-K 3 and pre-K 4, which is such a great question. And I really I think you'll agree with me. I don't know, phonological awareness, getting even phonemic awareness, getting them exposing them to the letter sounds, playing with them, over and over and over, and really getting that to be much more automatic is really mostly what you're doing. That and writing those letters, maybe in by the fours, not so much as in the threes. But do you guys agree with that? Anything for threes and fours that you would add? Priming them for that kindergarten year.
Yeah, sounds. Letters,
Sounds.
letters make sounds.
That's
And that
right.
would, yeah, that's if you're wondering what to do with little babies before they get to kindergarten, teach them that letters make sound. And what letter is that? When you're driving down the road or you're looking at the Cheerios box, have them tell you what letter that is and have them tell you what sound it makes.
Yeah,
It
it's a
is
good thing.
definitely setting them up.
Cheerios is kind of tricky because it starts with a digraph, but that's okay. Okay. How can schools best support classroom teachers in implementing structured literacy with consistency across grade levels? I love this question. And can I just throw out my answer really quick? We have keywords, right? For each, like maybe it's B, bat, B, right? I, if you keep the same keywords across all the grade levels, that is tremendously helpful. You don't want to have kids to have to learn new keywords as they're going through the years. But what else, you guys?
I think that district-wide coherence, that this is what we're doing, we're all in, we're there to support you. We have a literacy leadership team, and they ensure that we have that district-wide coherence. They have representatives that are classroom teachers and special education teachers and consultants and specialists. And I think that, that sends the message that, this is what we're doing. We're here to support you. It's important, like you said, to have the consistency so it builds. And that's one reason why we went with a primary resource. So there
Yeah.
was, consistency building across grade levels.
Yeah. that
Yeah.
each you're everybody knows that scope and sequence, and
Mhm.
everybody's following that scope and sequence.
Yeah. We
Yeah. I
literally
think,
all use, I'm sorry.
go ahead,
We
no, finish.
literally all use the same structured literacy plans, no matter what grade you're in. You're
Right.
choosing what works for that particular group of students in front of you, but it is the same plan, K to four in my, work a K to four elementary.
And that's what I was going to say is that vertical alignment of kindergarten talking to first, talking to second. So like I've gone and met with our third grade teachers and be like, okay, what words are you using when you're asking students to this, that, and the other? Like they're using Write Score, which is a supplemental activity that they use for writing instruction. I'm like, okay, tell me the structure of that. Let me start building in second grade their capacity to do those things in third grade. So I think definitely that vertical alignment. And then, um, like you said, Janet and Rachel, making it a non negotiable, where everyone's got the buy in. I actually, I actually have an email waiting for me to respond to from a brand new board member who just got elected that wants to come and watch me teach wit and wisdom because
Nice.
she's like I haven't seen it. She's like I've read about it, but I need to see it before I can make decisions about it. And so like that's what I mean when I'm talking about that vertical alignment that like there's a brand new board member that's like I need to get in a classroom and see what this looks like. And like to me,
Good for that person.
absolutely, but that just leans into how important that buy-in from the top down is. Because if you had a school board who didn't care, and there are schools in my district that have principals that it's not the first priority for them, it might be the fifth, and you can tell.
Yeah.
You can tell the schools that you walk in that buy in and the ones that don't. And so like that to me is a really big part about that everybody's in it.
Okay, I got
Have
another
you
question for
done?
you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to say learning walks are so supportive and helpful too with that to
Explain what
be
that
able to
is.
see oh, so we do learning walks in our district and it's where you get to go visit other teachers in your school or in the district. We go to other schools too, and it's just a small group of us, very informal. You're just there to, see what's going on in the classroom and collaborate and look at all the amazing things that other people are doing and you see that consistent it's motivating to you and it
Yes.
makes you feel really good and you're like wow look at all of this good stuff and you learn from it
If
as
you're a
well.
teacher listening to this, you get that comment. If you're a parent listening to this, you may not realize how isolating teaching is because you're basically in your own classroom. And if you don't have the opportunity, which you rarely do because you're teaching, to go see what other people are doing, it's kind of crazy, but it's wonderful when your administration gives you that opportunity.
Well, and we even went a step further. Our administration, for the first 4 years of our implementation, took literacy off of our TEKS. So the TEKS, where they would come and they would do their annual check you to make sure you're still a good teacher. They basically said like we're not coming during literacy because I'm not coming to like check on you when you're working on this skill. So that's also another really big part about like implementing structured literacy is that grace period. We a lot of times would
Mhm.
also do things like parallel coaching. So we would have teachers like you said, Rachel, where we come and we visit classrooms, and while I'm teaching, our instructional coach might walk over and say, let's try this real quick, and I'll just hand her my book. And so that's another opportunity where again people are seeing it. It's all from the top down, but it's not punitive. It's just like, let's all learn. Let's all learn so that we can all do better. And so I think that's one of the really important things about implementing structured literacy is to make sure you take that sort of like gotcha away from the clunkiness that is learning something brand new for the first time. When, like you said, I've been closing my door and teaching for 23 years. What do you mean I need to change everything? And so
It's
that
very
is
hard.
that. Yeah.
I'm going to jump to our next question. And you guys feel free, your audience, to type in questions into the chat. I'll try to get to them. We got about 11 minutes. Okay. This one is, how do you foster a love and create space for reading conventional texts in a structured literacy classroom environment? And I really love this question because there really is a difference. A decodable text, which you use in structured literacy, was really never meant to be the end all and the be all. It is
No.
not to say that you can't teach beautiful literature. So how do you guys bring in that beautiful literature?
I bring it in the same way I always have. I just support it differently.
Okay.
So one of the things I do is if I'm going to bring it in, I'm going to read through it and I'm going to try and find the hangups before I get there. So I might pull out the vocabulary words.
Mhm.
I might pull out concepts that I'm going to pre-teach before I get to that concept because if I pre-teach it, I can prevent it. So I can prevent confusion, I can prevent mispronunciations and things like that. But then also, like Rachel was saying, that becomes a repeated text. It becomes something that we read over and over again and we use over multiple days. So even though it feels like a conventional text and it's not a decodable, for example, we might do a news ELA article, but we're going to do it for 4 days and we're going to annotate it and we're going to look at the different parts. And so, like, how, the love for reading, like I said earlier, comes when you learn to read and then you love something you're good at, like you said. And so I think kids want those texts also. It's just about like, are you preventing what you know is going to hang the children up?
Rachel, how about you? Do you use read alouds? Do you read to your students?
Yes, and I couldn't agree more with what Allison said. I mean, perfectly said exactly how I feel and what I do. I do you do tackle it, in the same way that you would those kind of other texts and pulling out the vocab and we kind of follow the same process too with the read alouds. Like you're reading and annotating, and then you're thinking about, essential meaning and those comprehension type questions and just going through that similar process.
Well, and it's incredibly important to model that great reading, to model what it sounds like to read with expression, with prosody, to pause and contemplate what the author meant when you just read an inference, something that was not explicitly stated. I have to bring something to the text to understand. And modeling that and helping students realize that's what good reading looks like. Um,
Modeling the think aloud is so impactful
mhm.
because I a lot of times will just go put it on the board because my brain functioned, but my brain is a whole lot older than theirs. And so
Right.
I have to show them the steps that my brain is taking to get through a certain topic. We're teaching them reading, but we teach them writing and we teach them processing and behavior and humaning 101. And so yeah, teaching them how to think is part of our job.
Yeah. Okay. Somebody asked, what scope and sequence do you follow? Rachel, you want to start us off with that?
As far as a scope and sequence for just your small individual groups or
Right.
overall?
Are you using,
So
are you guys also using Wit and Wisdom? I don't remember what
we
you
do
said.
use Wit and Wisdom. We also use foundations. And so we tend to, we'll do our diagnostic benchmark assessments if this is a small group of students. And we will, meet them where they're at if it's a phonics group, and we'll just follow the, foundations scope and sequence.
Yeah.
Students who are in an intervention and are in tier 2 and tier 3 literacy, we receive their scope and sequence from the interventionist, from the consultant. And so that way, with when we're pulling them, we're reinforcing those skills and also, working on other skills as well. So we get their scope and sequence so we can double dip. So that's been really helpful and supportive as well.
Okay. Um, sorry, I'm gonna.
No, you're good. You're oh, we use UFly for our tier one whole group phonics instruction. And so we follow that pacing for our tier one instruction. For when we get into small groups, like I said earlier, we use the informal decoding inventory, which tests children on real words and nonsense words, and it comes with a scope. And so it kind of starts with CVC and then goes to blends and then goes to digraphs and then goes to magic E and then art control. So it kind of has the scope and sequence with it. So we can do the entire battery on a student. And like I said, that tells us the next place they need to go, but it also tells us what they can skip because that's an important part too is kids would wind up in group and the redbird group and they would just move at the pace of that group And what we want to do is move them as far as we can, as fast as we can. So by
Right.
having that piece, I know that you need magic E, but you don't need R control. So my next scope and sequence is really, again, focusing on that data to say,
Hmm.
what do you need next? Like I have a student this year who needed one cycle on consonant LE. He had every single skill he needed, the ones before it and the ones after it, but that one was tough for him. And so he went and did 3 weeks in that group and passed his progress monitoring, and then he got out because we're
I
not
love
going to
it.
hold you in a spot just because we need a spot.
That's perfect. I just posted the link, by the way, that is the resources that these wonderful panelists have helped us create. And the reason I did it now is because the question was about scope and sequence, and one of the answers was UFly, and that UFly is listed there. That they have wonderful free resources online. There's also a really excellent book that's not cheap, but it's really good, that you can buy from them as well. Okay. Um, oh gosh. Yep. So two more questions. Um, how do you start? Like if somebody doesn't, is like maybe looking to work part-time, in a school or something, and where do they even begin? Um, what would you recommend they do? Somebody who's either looking for a full-time or a part-time job in a school, trying to become a structured literacy person.
I mean,
Uh,
you have to do your research and you know, that I think is when you're looking for jobs now and sitting on interview panels, we really look for candidates who have knowledge in structured literacy and how they would run small reading groups, how they would do whole group lessons, and just what they know about the science of reading.
yeah, absolutely. I think checking to see, what kind of training that you can get and I'm thinking about the people who are I'm in year 5 and I'm thinking about the people who are really just starting this journey. And so I think there's a couple of things that you should do if you're in that position. So yes, I think if you're out searching for a job, checking for trainings that you can get to get OG trained or to get foundations trained is something that you can do for your skill set. But also, we were talking earlier about resources and finding resources, and so that's another great thing. Is I know on the list we have Sold a Story, which is a great place to start if you're trying to understand the minutia of how we got here. But I think you can also find like Melissa and Lori Love Literacy is a wonderful podcast that talks literacy.
Yes.
I have there's a ton of people on Instagram. The Mindful Rachel is wonderful. She Mindful Teacher Rachel is great. Farmer Loves Phonics. So like finding the people that are speaking this language is really helpful too, because it just helps build your background knowledge to then kind of implement a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about tonight.
Um, we're almost out of time, and I just want to post one thing, because, and I'd love to hear your input as well. The last question we have is about how to find out where the students' gaps are, and maybe it's your own child. I just posted a link to purchase something called the Gallistel Ellis. I think it's a fantastic resource, but maybe you guys have other ones. It's a comprehensive test. It's not nationally normed, but it'll tell you, does he understand magic E? Does he understand consonant LE? Does he understand the sounds? Like, where are the gaps? Are there other diagnostic assessments you guys would um, think of to fill the gaps, to identify the gaps?
I've used the phonics core assessment.
That's another good one. I don't, but yes, exactly. It's
Um,
very similar, by the way, to Galstel Ellis.
Okay.
and IDI is very much in that same vein. I think Hegarty's is a great for
Mm,
phonological awareness and phonemic awareness is a
mhm.
really great indicator, especially like if you have children that are struggling with rhyming words or you have children who are struggling with, beginning sounds, ending sounds, medial sounds, and or changing of sounds. Like those are some really, especially for our younger students, some really kind of complex language and literacy components that you got to know to do. And so there's a ton out there. And I will say that, if it looks good and it tells you something, then use something that will tell you something. If your district is not at a place right now where we have an assessment packet and we use Acadience and we use Hegarty and we use the Johnson Spelling Inventory and the IDI, and like these are things that the district has given to us. But if your district hasn't done that, there's this the one that you just shared, Janet, but there's also just resources out there where you can find just to know things. Cox Campus is another great resource that has some progress monitoring
Hmm.
that is a way for you to just give a little. I mean, if it's nothing else, you could take each skill and do a quick little assessment on it.
Yeah.
So yeah,
So I can't believe I'm going to say this, but it's 8 o'clock and we got to go. But y'all, we got through almost every question. So I'm sorry if we didn't get to yours, but thank you everybody for coming tonight, and we so appreciate it.
absolutely. Thank
And
you.
thank you so much to
Thank
Allison
you,
and Rachel.
everybody.
Bye, guys.